Kiefer. Zingy.
Here.
Gage. Isom.
Here.
Severson.
Here.
Flora.
Here.
And Councilmember Cruz is here.
Excellent. Please join me in Pledge Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Is this the communication bill? And then, what do you call it? Teleconference on the FEMA staff for the floodplain mapping. That's the only thing we have on the table. Persons to be heard. Tonight we have a very distinguished guest, the former mayor of the city council, the very honorable Bob Weinstein. Remember, that's how you should address me after October.
Well, with that introduction, I think I'll change the subject I was going to talk about. Bob Weinstein, 831 Forest Ave, for the record. I'm here for the same reason I appeared to you last year, and that's to discuss pedestrian safety, which I know is an issue that you and others have been working on. First of all, I want to thank the mayor, the council, the manager and staff, especially the public works director and police chief, for taking this issue by the horns and coming up with a sensible and affordable proposal involving crosswalk enhancements and speed informational devices. As you know, or may know, I attended the DOT meeting last week, and I know that there was a meeting with city staff prior to that. You know, DOT, as we know, has a lot of regulations to follow before they approve and fund such enhancements, even in the best of fiscal climates, which we know does not exist. You don't. My understanding also is that they consider crash data only, crashes that result in injury to people, not crosswalks where there are a lot of near misses. And I think we can all think of our own near misses with people in certain crosswalks. So they don't consider crosswalks that you and the community knows represent an ongoing danger to people. From what I saw at the meeting, I think you have a window of opportunity to work cooperatively with DOT to get their approval for the city to make pedestrian safety enhancement improvements. Jump through it while it's still there. I think the Public Works Director has developed a sound proposal. I urge you to approve it and fund it. Get DOT approval as quickly as you can. The $110,000 represents less than 0.5% of your general fund budget. So I'm sure without knowing your budget details that you can do that. And then finally, I would also urge you to have staff continue outreach to the public with the intent of asking people to, for lack of a better word, nominate or make suggestions for other crosswalks that might need to be examined for safety purposes and for consideration for either going ahead and improving it or not. So anyway, that's it, and thank you for paying attention to this issue. A lot of people continue to care about it, as you all know. So,
any questions for Bob? Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
All right, Bob was the only one signed up for speaking to the council. Is there somebody else that'd like to come? Come on up, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, seated council members. Kevin Christovich, 419 Baden. I'm going to keep this real short. I did miss the sign-in. I'm just going to kind of mirror on what Mr. Weinstein just said, and I would like to say yay on today's front page. Headlines with the changing of the speed limit on Stedman Street and adding the extra speed limit sign on Stedman Street by the coffee shop as well. When I saw this paper posted on social media, I immediately ran down the store to get a copy at Tatsuda's, and while I was in there paying for the paper, the police had someone pulled over in the parking lot. So I figured that's what was going on. They were pulling people over and probably giving them a courtesy warning that the speed limit has been changed. I then figured out where they were parked south of town, pulling these drivers over, so I walked down there and noticed the new sign. And between Tatsuta's and Brewed Awakening's coffee shop, I watched 5 people in their cars on their phones, texting, talking, going both directions. So I waited for the officer to come back and across the street, and I asked him, how many motorists have you pulled over? And he said, I had 6 so far. And I asked him what the time window was, and he said it was less than 20 minutes. So, and I conveyed to him the number of distracted drivers that I counted on that short span. And I know that this law cannot be enforced right now. There's some gray areas that have to be taken beyond a city level. So I called the office of Dan Ortez today, and he called me back, and we talked about this distracted driving law, what we can do to get it enforceable in the state and in our community as well. And he's going to look into it, and he agrees that it is a serious issue that is growing in our town. I've seen young teenage kids driving and texting, and when you're 16 and you got your license, you're not exactly a good driver. So texting and not paying attention's worse. I called Bert Stedman's office to talk to him about that. He hasn't got back to me yet, so we're going to try and work on that and see what we can get done. And if there is a law that can be put together like state of Washington, the city's going to make a lot of money if you catch people texting. I mean, I've seen the printed penalty schedule that the state has for texting and driving, and the first offense, just texting, is like $130. And now that the state of Washington's taken the gloves off with their hands-free campaign and law, the first ticket's $140-some. The second one's over $200, and they take that ticket and they turn it into your insurance company. So you're getting the ticket fine and you're getting whammied by your insurance company as well. So this will take time, but it is a growing concern. So I'm really happy to see this. Things are going in the right direction with this crosswalk improvements and making the public aware of safety, and I hope it can keep going. And I think now with the speed limit changes, there's a public safety announcement campaign in the works through radio, TV, social media, possibly the newspaper, I'm sure. So people are going to get the message out, and it's working. They were busy. I counted 10 cars so that they pulled over today. So just keep up the good work, and we'd like to stay involved with this as much as possible. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you. Anybody else who'd like to address the council tonight? Come on up, sir.
Yeah, my name is Eric Wallen, and I live on Schombar Road. And most days, me or my wife walk my son to school. This is concerning the crosswalk safety and such. So, walk my son to school at the Tonga School, and since we've been walking him, my wife or I have been hit nearly 3 times, 3 misses, twice in the crosswalks and once at the Woodside Drive Schombar intersection, where there's a no printed painted crosswalk. And I've talked to 2 different neighbors, and they've had their own near misses and actually been touched by cars near the crosswalks as well. And so, and on 2 occasions, cars have passed along the outside when there's been people stopped for people in the crosswalks too. They've gone around. So we've called KPD twice to complain about the poor driving. And and after the calls, there's been a slowdown in the traffic violations. There must have been a police officer parked down the road or something. But we believe that the school zone is so vast from the skate park up to nearly that Woodside Drive intersection that people maybe think that the school zone ends after the middle school or something. But it's noticeably faster traveling uphill. Like they got to get momentum to carry them up the hill or something. I don't know. But so I just I think that there needs to be some kind of painted crosswalk at the bus stop signs near the intersection of Woodside and Schoenbar, and maybe some better lighting there. There's 2 lights there, but the overgrown from the green belt, the greenway, there is kind of blocking some of the light from getting to that intersection too. And so that's all I really wanted to. Something.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We're making notes, and we're in charge of painting, so we'll make sure we take care of it.
Right on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else who wants to address the council tonight? Who brought me the flowers? What are these for?
I can't see you.
It must be for Katie, since she's been here now 25 years as I city clerk, and I just want to make sure we make it was really good. And I've made sure that we sent her some from the council and the management, that so we recognize her and appreciate her. And they're in my way still, but that's okay. That's all right. All right, that brings us down to consent agenda. I was going to add B2 and 3 to it. I don't think B1, Judy, you can vote on, so we'll just leave it there to vote on everybody else. And then under appointment of boards and commissions, I had somebody else that I mentioned I talked to about planning commission before we made appointments. I don't know if they're interested anymore, but I told them I'd talk to them. So let's push that to the next meeting so I can make sure I keep my promise.
It isn't a time frame.
We'll be quick. And that's all I have unless somebody else has. I'm digging.
Now, did you add B3 to the consent?
Yes. Do you want to cancel that?
I'd like to have some more information in the other room on it. This continually buying this stuff is not totally clear.
Okay, we'll take that off. Excellent. All right. Do we have a motion to consent?
I move the consent.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anybody have any questions? Oh, that's right. Madam Clerk, can you please read that?
Approval of minutes of the regular city council meeting of January 4th, 2018.
Okay.
Liquor license renewal, Sourdough Liquor Store and Newtown Liquor. Second amendment to tower co-location and land sublease agreement for placement of line-of-sight radio equipment. That's with Vertical Bridge Towers 2, LLC. Did you want those other appointments on for the Historic
Yeah, let's do
Commission?
those.
Okay, so there's a couple of appointments for the Historic Commission. And exempting the procurement of programming content for KPU TV from the competitive bidding and written quotation requirements of the Ketchikan Municipal Code. That's with National Cable Television Cooperative and Ubiquity Incorporated.
Anybody have any questions on any of the items? Call the roll.
Ziggy?
Yes.
Isom? Yes. Severson?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Coos?
Yes.
All right, that passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to nothing. That brings us down to new business 7A, Ketchikan Historic Commission presentation. Dragon, you're on.
Thanks for moving those flowers.
I can see it.
Good evening. Got the old lady glasses on. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I believe the council received a pretty extensive packet of materials regarding the Historic Commission, so I'm not going to go over all those materials, but try to hit a few points that I've had questions from various community members about the Historic Commission, and then also talk a little bit about what we're trying to bring together at this point as projects for the Commission to work on. So, you did receive a basic overview of who we are, and you received 2 references to the code. So I know that you understand what that information is in terms of the background. But it's important to understand that this commission exists to preserve the history of Ketchikan, to be a part of that process, and that we are here to preserve the history, which is an aesthetic issue for our community, bringing people to our community, but it's also an economic driving factor for our community. So those are very much the reasons why we exist. And the commission became official or moved into that capacity through the code. That would be the Municipal Chapter 2.88 in 1988. So we actually have been around a long time. And I understand people are not knowing who we are, so that's part of what we want to clear up in this process and getting involved with the community. Okay. There's some confusion that I've heard that people don't understand. What's the difference between the Historic Commission and the Tongass Historical Society, Historic Ketchikan? What's the difference? Those organizations are nonprofit organizations, and in essence, they serve themselves. The commission only serves the city. We serve the city and all of their departments. We historically have served the city in general questions regarding historic preservation or historic properties. We have consulted or provided various information, reports to the different departments, Public Works, working closely with them, also Ports and Harbor, but also to the City Council. And I know that may not have happened during your term, some of you on this council. It has happened historically that we provided information directly for the City Council that they've requested regarding historic matters and historic properties in this community. So, okay, and to kind of tag on to that, we definitely are in a rebuilding mode at this point. We had really a slew of some difficult years when we didn't have a director at the museum, and a lot of times that became a drifting point for our commission, and that we were meeting as often or being as actively involved in activities. But we are rebuilding at this point. I believe you're going to appoint a couple more members tonight, which will bring us almost to a full commission board. We will have 2 open spaces if those are approved this evening, and we believe we should be able to fill those spots. We have people who are interested and that we're in communication with. We're hoping to bring those to the council, the last 2 positions, by the first meeting in February. Okay. So, again, a rebuilding mode. But I'm very confident that we almost have a full board at this point. Great people, excellent people. So I feel very confident about that. So, and again, you do have a list of those members in your packet. Okay. So what are some of the things we've done in the past? I just want to touch on a few of these. But one of the things we worked very diligently with our the State Department of Transportation. They do a lot of work in our community, and often that does involve historic properties, historic landmarks, historic areas. So we have worked with them. One that's probably the most recent, well, not the most recent, but one that was quite a significant issue was they were building the wall along Water Street, the downtown Water Street area. And if we hadn't been involved in that process and working with the Department of Transportation, you would now have a chain link fence there. They wanted to put a chain link fence because of security. That was the best thing they felt should be there. So we thought that they needed to look at the history of that area and to put something in more aesthetically pleasing and in alignment with our history. So that was one of the big activities we were involved with some years ago. We also have been involved with dollars that we have access to that we can funnel down to community projects. One would be the colorful character signage that's now up on several buildings identifying the history of that particular building. And they're fun. You know, they talk about the characters that were part of that building and the businesses that were there. And they're a lot of fun. And so we were able to bring those dollars to the community and have that. I think we did 27 signs. And also we were the conduit for the 2 historic districts, getting those surveys done and those moving forward to get national registration. So that would be the downtown area is now on the registry, and also Creek Street. We also have Hopkins Alley, that is also a historic district. So, moving back to the history of Ketchikan, one of the things, we are the first city, but we're the first city in a lot of areas, some kind of notorious, but some of them good. And the real issue about history is we now have 3 national registered areas. That is more than any other location in Alaska. We have more historic buildings as of today. I say that because we're losing many of them every day. But as of today, we still have more historic identified buildings in this community than any place else in Alaska. So those are important things. We want to preserve that history. So other activities, we certainly have been a support to other agencies in the community who are going after historic preservation dollars. So we try to support them in that process. If it's something that we feel is fitting for our community and we want to see move forward, that it will help preserve our history, then we certainly provide support to those organizations in the community. As we came back in this regrouping of the Historic Commission, we started talking about what have we heard over the years, what are things that are important in this community that we need to be looking at. And one of the things that we found repeatedly over and over and over was the issue of signage. And signage is a very critical issue at this point, and I'll tap on that a little bit in a second, but what we wanted to do was find something where we possibly could come together in a project, serve as possibly a conduit to bring people together to talk about signage, work on signage. And so our really idea was, let's see if we can make that happen. And let me just clarify about signage. I'm not talking about the directional or safety signage. You might, stop signs, crosswalks, those type of signs, maybe Department of Transportation signs. What we're talking about there's 5 basic categories of signage. There's the wayfinding signage that you see on those square box kind of identification, Wayfair signage. We also have the walking tour, which is the Wayfair signage. We have informational kiosks, which have volumes of information about the history. There aren't so many of those, but you're probably most familiar with those down in the Creek Street area. We have interpretive and colorful characters. So those kind of signs are talking about history, and we also have the colorful characters that I spoke about earlier. We have historic identity, where you're simply naming something. This is the building, this is this location, this is the gold mine, whatever it is. So a historical identification. And then there's also a number of types of signage that you kind of lump together. For instance, Ketchikan Visitors Bureau did 5 informational signs about history. And so we have several entities throughout the history of this community that have been involved in those type of projects. So that kind of falls into one category there. It's all of that signage. So really what we're hoping to do in moving forward with this, and we have had an initial meeting, we had on the 11th, bringing who we could identify as the primary stakeholders in signage. And we had such a turnout. It was amazing, actually, that everybody came. And we didn't actually find that we left a lot of people out of that stakeholder list, so that was nice, too. But we left the mayor out, so he'll be invited to the next one. But our hope is to actually just bring people together. We want to talk about consistency of our signage, continuity of our signage, that we're following themes. We want to talk about shared resources and supports. Are there things that we can actually combine? Are there resources financially that we can combine? So this is a very important issue, we feel. And we want to see a collective voice, and we think that's important because there's dollars that any group needs to go after, whether it's something that we actually can do through the Historic Commission or other community programs. People need to come together. It needs to be one voice, a collective voice in that process. And so that's very much what we're trying to find in this, and we're calling it the Signage Committee. So creative, I know. But, so that's kind of where we're at this point, what we're working on. And when we're talking about signage, the next step is what needs to happen. We've identified that there's a lot of signage that needs to be repaired, and there needs to be maintenance. When you talk about the walking tour signage, it's missing, it's incorrect, it's definitely damaged, and also we have quite a bit of damage that needs to be looked at on the Wayfair signage that's all over town. So we think that is probably going to be identified and really has been identified as a priority for this signage committee, and that we'll be looking at that, coming together where we can find funds for that. We certainly want to see those types of signage definitely repaired and replaced to the best of our ability by May 1, when we have our visitors primarily coming to our community and needing that wayfinding signage. So that will be probably a priority that we're looking at to see what can happen between now and May 1. And then looking at all the other projects that, very much need to happen. A lot of these signs, it's been a learning process for every organization, whether it's the city or anybody else has put up. The products haven't held up. In our weather, in our reality, they haven't held up. They need to be replaced. So that's a big issue. So, any questions?
Any questions for Dragon? Go ahead, Bob.
So how do you figure you're going to start? You're just going to take an inventory of the signs that we have and the individual condition of those, and then try to put that in some kind of a form and prioritize some stuff, that kind of thing?
Well, in the Wayfair signage, there are inventories of those projects. Actually, Steve Corporon has been the keeper of those signs since they got plopped in his lap, and has done a wonderful job. So there are organizations that have those kind of things. Historic Ketchikan has all the information on the colorful characters. Historic Ketchikan and the mayor on the walking tour map. So that's not a piece of what we would be doing, but bringing those people to the table and say, what are the priorities here and what do we need to do? But that information is there, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Reagan, thank you very much. All right, that brings us down to 782, submittal of site remediation for a report to the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, 347 Baden Street. Do we have a motion?
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I move the City Council direct staff to submit the 347 Baden Street remediation report prepared by PBS Engineering and Environmental, Inc. to the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, requesting acceptance of the report and issuance of the site closure.
Moved and seconded. Anybody have any questions? Dave, do you have anything to add?
No.
Call the roll.
Zingy? Yes. Isom? Yes. Severson?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Coos?
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Brings us to 783, budget transfer, Thomas Avenue crosswalk improvements. We have two options. Does somebody have a motion?
Let's see, two is that we...
Yeah.
My machine isn't cooperating.
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
I move the City Council direct the City Manager to request the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities grant such authority as may be required to undertake those specific improvements to the crosswalks at the intersections of Deermount Street and Stedman Street, Ketchikan Medical Center and North Tongass Avenue and Heckman Street, Vigor Shipyard and North Tongass Avenue, as identified in the Public Works Director's Report dated January 11, 2018, authorize the City Manager to further petition the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to nominate the remaining improvements to the crosswalks at these intersections as detailed in the Public Works Director's Report for funding through the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and approve a budget transfer of $110,000 from appropriated reserves to the Public Works Sales Tax Fund to the Streets Division's 2018 Tongass Avenue Crosswalk Improvements Capital Account.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mark, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, this is great. This is a great first step, and I think we should just
make this happen as soon as we possibly can and just take it upon ourselves to get to work.
Anybody else? Bob?
Yeah, I'd ask Mr. Hilson to come up and explain exactly what's in this so the public that are viewing can understand what we're going to do.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes, Mark Hilson, Public Works Director. So this motion entails some improvements at 3 intersections. So it's Deermont and Tongass. It's also the hospital intersection for their crosswalk. And it's also the Vigor-Heckman Tongass intersection. So essentially what it entails are push-button activated lighted pedestrian crossing signs. So when you approach the crosswalk, there's a button there that you can push, and the sign lights up to draw attention to the fact that somebody's attempting to cross the crosswalk. There would be 3 of those intersections, each getting 2 signs apiece. There would also be 3 speed signs, radar speed signs akin to what we have at the library. We found that those are very effective. We're envisioning 1 for each approach to the Deermont intersection, and then 1 coming into town from the north in the southbound lane, approaching the Vigor-Heckman intersection. And then, of course, we would have a relocation of the hospital crosswalk. The situation there has changed quite a bit with the addition, the new hospital addition, and a new doorway that comes right out onto Tongass Avenue. So really, we felt the best location for that crosswalk would be lining up with the door. The existing crosswalk is next to a big tree that's on private property and next to a lot of bushes. And it there is a street light there, but it makes it dark and it obscures the view in that area. So lining it up with closer to the main doorway, there is a bus stop there, so we have to kind of adjust for that, and a driveway on the other side of the road. But making those improvements would get people in under roof quicker and line up with the doors that go into the elevator.
Anybody else with questions? Bob and then Dick.
So the relocation of the crosswalk, we're going to apply for a permit for encroachment in the state right-of-way in order to put the signs up. Is there a cooperative effort, or I would like to see us pursue one to where the state paints the lines on the road and maintains them, rather than the city of Ketchikan? I want to make sure that's a clear distinction in our process here. The state has taken over all the painting on the highway and has been trying to keep up on that, but I don't think that's the city's responsibility in this relocation and stuff. I think that we're going to do the signs and move forward with the speed limit stuff, but I would like to see the pavement markings done by the state.
I think that's a very reasonable request. They do all, as you mentioned, they do all the other crosswalks in the state right away. It would not make sense to have one orphaned crosswalk that we would do. So, and we could do it to their standards. So.
Okay, Dick?
Yeah, on the 2 signs you put one on either side of the crossing, I assume they're solar powered?
Correct.
Do they talk to each other?
They do.
Okay. So that means either side lights them both up. The other one probably deals with a signal traffic light at Heckman. And I assume you've got some way to evaluate whether there really warrants it or not, because that, in my first inclination, is that it's one street coming onto a street. So anyway, it's just, I just got concerned about it. It's probably going to end up with 2 crosswalks there, one right there anyway, and one down the middle like you're talking about. But the stoplight just bothers me. But you do the numbers.
Bob?
Mark, is there going to be any realignment of the crosswalk at Vigor? Are we going to use the existing? Are we moving it down closer? Public Works?
The plan is to move it down closer to Public Works. So if you could recall, Vigor's driveway accesses, there's actually two. There's the main one that all the employees goes in, and then there's the delivery one. In meeting with Vigor management, they were very keen on the idea of putting the crosswalk adjacent to their delivery one. And they said long term they would like to have a turnstile there where employees could come out there as well as the other turnstile. So that was something they were very interested in. I will caution that DOT does frown on, that would be considered a mid-block crosswalk, and they do frown on those. So we'll have to see if that makes it through the process. But Vigor felt very strongly that that was the right location for their operation. They are growing and hiring, thankfully. So there can only be more people coming out of there trying to cross. Our streets division supervisor, Nick Kepler, he recommended that it be placed there as well. His feeling was that Public Works employees would be more likely to use it from streets and wastewater in the garage. And that also people who were walking on the sidewalk who got off the airport ferry would be coming down, and that would give them the opportunity to cross there to go over to A&P and the stores over there. So,
Nick?
Yeah, one more question, Mark, is at the Heckman Street, that crosswalk's on the south side. And I'm wondering if we keep it there from the standpoint of Vigor and some others, if it was put on the north side of the Heckman side.
mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether that's a good idea or not, but it just seems like it'd be more appropriate there. Otherwise, when Vigor goes in and crosses, they got to cross here and cross back.
That's absolutely true. We did look at that. That was an option that we evaluated. There are some complications to that. The curb ramps don't line up. So from Vigor's driveway is not perfectly aligned with Heckman Street on that side.
No.
So the crosswalk would be at a little bit of an angle, making it longer. And, you know, the other thing is we looked at if we were going to do that, then we'd look to close the gaps in the fence of Vigor so that employees would be channeled to that crosswalk as opposed to be tempted to go kind of cut the angle through the parking lot to then jaywalk,
Yeah,
right? So that one would be kind of a two-phased project, and you never know. Should DOT refuse to permit the mid-block crosswalk, we may very well be back looking at that as an option.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't have to walk back south very far to make that crosswalk on the north side of
Right.
Hickman. It's just
It was a very close evaluation between those two options. The fact that Vigor's management was unanimous and adamant that the other location was really what they wanted, that really tipped the scales to us recommending that one.
Bob?
Does that affect the parking along that side at all? Because you got to have a 10-foot clearance in front of a.
No.
I think there's parking all the way in front of A&P, if I remember right.
There's a bus stop there,
Okay.
so we can get just one side or the other of the bus stop.
And then the way it lines up, how is the access? I mean, we know they're all going to A&P to get lunch or whatever they do. Is there there's a small wall and some shrubs, I think, that we're going to come up against? Is there a way that we can mitigate that? Maybe put a ramp in there?
We can look at that. I do know now that, well, I shouldn't say now, but prior to Vigor making pedestrian safety a real point of emphasis in their company, their employees used to cross right there and go right up and through, the A&P parking lot. To make it more accessible, we might have to do something, as you mentioned. We can look at that, certainly.
Anybody else? Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
All right, call the roll.
Flora,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Zingy,
Yes.
Coos,
Yes.
Severson.
Yes.
Okay, that passes 5-0. That brings us to 7B1, addendum to the lease agreement between the Plaza and the City of Ketchikan, KPU. Do we have a motion?
Your Honor.
Yes.
I move the City Council authorize the General Manager to execute an addendum to the lease agreement between the Plaza LLC and the City of Ketchikan, DBA Ketchikan Public Utilities, for the lease in addition of an additional 1,000 square feet of space at the Plaza by the Sales, Marketing, and Customer Service Division, and approve funding for the division's 2018 rents and leases account number 645.01.
Second.
Moved in second. Anybody have any comments? Judy, I hope you'll abstain. Call the roll, please.
Zingy, abstain. Isom,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Flora,
Yes.
Coos.
Yes.
All right, that passes 4-0. That brings us down to 7B3. We're going to go to an executive session before we do anything on that item. Do we have a motion for the executive session B1? What?
Is that the executive?
I think, isn't that the right one?
Oh, yeah,
I don't think
it
we-
is.
The GCI communications through, it's the GCI one which we're talking about now. It's the review and discussion of proprietary information associated with the purchase of additional internet access service from GCI Communications through the existing IRU purchase agreement. Do we have a motion, please?
Yeah, Honor.
Yes.
I move based on the, General Manager's memorandum dated January 8, 2018, that the City Council find it is in the city's best interest to consider those matters in executive session, and that the council go into executive session under Ketchikan Municipal Code number 2.04025A1 and 3 to review and discuss those aspects of the IRU purchase agreement concerning the purchase of additional IRU spectrum capacity with GCI Communications, the knowledge of which would clearly have an adverse impact upon the finances of the city, and which would contain information required to be confidential pursuant to the Alaska Trade Secrets Act.
Oh, thanks. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. That was too early to get back. Okay, well, we're not
We're
missing.
going to do a roll call. Zingy,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Flora,
Yes.
Coos.
Yes.
Sorry, I get distracted easy. Okay, we're back in session. We met in executive session with management at this time. We are back to item 7B3. Do we have a motion?
You have to reload everything.
We're in 7B3, purchase of additional retail internet service from GCI Communications Corp. through the existing IRU agreement.
Yeah, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Bob. Dick.
I move the City Council approve the purchase of additional retail internet access service from GCI Communications Corp. through the existing IRU purchase agreement in the amount of $180,000 and authorize the funding from the Telecommunications Division 2018 rents and leases infrastructure account number 64504.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I think everybody's ready to vote? Call the roll.
Coos,
Yes.
Flora,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Isom, Zingy.
Yes.
Okay, next we have vouchers, Daily News, $4,616.97. Do we have a motion?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move for approval of vouchers in the Ketchikan Daily News in the amount of $4,616.97.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call the roll.
Flora,
Yes.
Severson,
Yes.
Coos,
Yes.
Zingy,
Yes.
Isom.
Yes.
That brings us this manager's report. Dave?
You know, a couple of things, Your Honor. We did have a teleconference earlier this week with FEMA staff to talk about the floodplain mapping and the public meeting coming up on the 25th. I would encourage anybody that has interest in properties within 22 feet elevation of the coastline to attend the public meeting on the 25th at the Civic Center. I think that's going to be very enlightening and informational. You asked me today earlier about the potholes on Tongass Avenue. I asked Mark to get a hold of DOT and see what they had for a schedule on that, and Mark was able to talk with them on that. So I'll defer to him on that one.
Yes, Public Works Director Mark Hilson. So there's two projects relative to the potholes. One's a short-term project that the director of the South Coast region of ADOT said was going to happen this summer. He was sketchy on details in terms of exactly what the fix was. I asked, is it filling in the potholes? Is it an overlay project? How would that really be constructed? We had some concerns about, how that asphalt would really be rolled properly with those giant ruts. How could this really get put together correctly? And so I was not able to get any more detail today on that particular part of the project. They did not have their bid documents together. They couldn't tell me exactly how they were going to get that done. We talked more elaborately about the tunnel, what I call the tunnel, the North Tongass from Tunnel North project, which goes from the tunnel basically all the way up to the bridge over Hoadley Creek. That project, DOT, they said, we're aware that, the road is in really bad shape. They didn't give me an exact date of construction. They said that it's planned that they're going to do it in fiscal year 2020, which would be the summer of 2020, with bidding in November of 2019, so a year from this November. They are aware, and I reminded them of the deplorable condition of that road, and I am going to follow up on the short-term fix, because if, this just can't wait till 2020 for anything to be done. In the course of communicating with them, they said that, we are sensitive to the fact that it is bad, and we are looking at ways to take the programmed project, which is a state transportation improvement program project, federal dollar project, and accelerate parts of it to get the worst areas fixed. I'd be interested to see, how that plays out in reality and how they can make that happen. I'm just being honest, I'm not sure how that can really get done, but perhaps they have some ideas that I'm unaware of. So that's the update.
As long as we just keep pressure on them to do something, I'm getting a lot of feedback on it. Calls again today, so anybody runs down that road, it's just amazing.
Mayor,
Yes.
I think all of us are getting feedback on that road, and half of us are driving down the yellow line. We're not driving in the same lane.
Right.
And I got pulled over about 6 months ago because I was sort of not where I should be, and they realized what I was doing. So, but the other one is, I think about every month or 2 months, we ought to get some feedback from those guys how they're doing. So don't let up on them.
Okay.
All right, anybody else?
There are two things there. There's the ongoing issue with how bad the roads are, but there are, after this last freeze and thaw cycle, there are holes in areas there weren't holes before, and they're sharp edged, and those are the ones that, pothole patching is kind of thing you do. I know they can't do the whole street, but these new ones that show up that are not part of that continuous long wear strip need to be addressed at some point. I know they used to come out and do the things down here at the intersection, different things when that would happen, so I'm hoping they have a plan to do some interim patching as we go through this, because there are more holes showing up.
I agree. I've seen those, and I will make contact and find out what their intentions are with those.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Dave, continue.
Nope, that's going to do it.
Anybody have any questions on the manager's report? All right, seeing none, city clerk's file,
Nothing, Your Honor.
city attorney's file.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you. Future agenda items. Mayor and council comments. Mark.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Bob.
Need my glasses there.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So, a little bit about the FEMA teleconference. First thing that I asked is, so what was the what would happen if we, as a community, opted out? Wrangell, I think, is an opted out community. But what that does is it affects the lenders dramatically, because then they can't participate in the FEMA floodplain insurance, and people will have to go out on an open market, which is, I understand, by far, there's less people out there selling it, and it's very expensive to do that. We also would not be eligible for some federal grants in the community in regards to FEMA projects. And then if we had a natural disaster such as a tsunami, which floodplain insurance does cover, FEMA wouldn't be obligated to come in and help us with that, because we opted out. We wouldn't get FEMA money. So there are some concerns in regards to how we do that. In general conversation, I asked, well, it's very obvious that FEMA is upside down. They, with the recent events in the Gulf of Mexico, Puerto Rico and stuff, they're out of cash. And it seems that they're broadening their perspective by doing this mapping and bringing more people in and sharing those costs over a broader perspective. And is there anything in regards to historic values, rates, history in the area and stuff? The rate for floodplain insurance is set by Congress. And it's just that you have a 1% probability of something happening, and you fall in that category, and here's what it is. Some of the numbers I looked at, potentially a $200,000 house wanting $140,000 worth of floodplain insurance could cost you $4,000 a year. It could be a dramatic hit, and in the city, in the community, there's 48 floodplain insurance within the city, and when they do the remapping, it's going to be 1,100 in the community. It's going to be basically everything on the waterfront. But we probably don't have the ability to fight that, because this is happening nationwide. It's not just happening to Ketchikan. But one of the things that was brought to light is constructability. FEMA says that if you're going to build within the floodplain, that 22-foot mark, whatever it is, they haven't really established yet, but that's about what it's going to be. The only construction that is acceptable is post-beam and piling. So, as everybody in Ketchikan has done in the past, they've built these big, fancy retaining walls out of rock and filled behind them and then poured a slab on grade. That will no longer be acceptable. And I can understand that in Florida and the Gulf, where they don't have rock and they fill them behind with sand and sandy roads out and stuff like that. Juneau has sent a letter back to our delegation protesting that. But I'm not sure if they did it just for Southeast Alaska, or for all of Alaska. But Southeast Alaska has rock. We have a lot of it, and we have a different, way of doing this. We're building on rock. We're not building on sand, and so we're going to take some objections to that. And I think the borough is going to probably lead the charge on that. So that was one of the only areas that we could see that we could really, do some work in order to change what we're going to do. Then we focus on what this meeting is going to be about. And I would urge anybody that is suspecting they're going to be in a floodplain to go to the borough and get their map of their properties first. And then during the meeting on the 25th, they'll have representatives there, and it sounds like they're going to have a table set up so you can come in and find out exactly where you sit in the floodplains, what your requirements are going to be. There will be some people there that deal with floodplain insurance, where FEMA isn't going to give you a quote on your insurance. You can get a ballpark idea of what that's going to do. I tried to ask them if the rates were going to stay stable, and they wouldn't commit to that. like anything else, rates go up. So that kind of tells you what's going to happen there. The borough has been participating with FEMA since 1975. They've been a member. But because the borough area hadn't been mapped and it hadn't been regulated, they didn't have to meet the qualification. And so with this coming on board, there's going to be some changes to those properties out there. And I think there's going to be a lot of grandfathering in the way that construction was done and all this, but I think new construction is going to have more hoops to jump through for sure in order to meet that floodplain insurance. And again, if you own your property, if you don't have a federal loan, you don't fall under this. They hold you hostage through this, through Fannie, Freddie, HUD, veteran, whatever it may be. And so it'll be anybody that's buying property, anybody that owns property should attend that meeting and get some kind of a clarification of how it affects them, because it is, as they said, it's going to be very individualized how it affects your property. And they take that plane and they take it horizontally back into your property. So if all your property was in a tidal zone and you filled it and built back, even if you're back away from the edge, you still have to do post and beam. You have to drive down through the field and stuff like that for any new construction.
So Bob, does the water stop coming up? Did you get to the top of the post?
No. But then we were really direct in asking that question, and they gave us the statute that says post beam and piling, nothing else is accepted.
House on floats.
So kind of felt like I standing on the track waiting for the train to run me over. But and the individuals working with the state, they were very open, very candid about it. Again, this is a national policy. Local control of it's probably very little in regard to how they do that. But what will also happen is the property owner, when they become under this new floodplain and they go after whatever insurance they need or whatever they're going to do, they're going to hire a surveyor to come in and do that on their own and find out exactly where that fits. So there's going to be an expense to it.
So you're saying that current homeowners that already have a loan or own it are going to get affected also?
Absolutely.
They're going to have to pay that same insurance?
Yeah.
That's only about $4 million a year out of this town at that rate you quoted.
And again, I don't want to be misquoted or anything like that. Go to the meeting and find out how it affects you individually is the answer.
Anything else, Bob?
Nope.
Thank you very much for taking care of that. Julie.
Just one thing. I experienced something very frustrated earlier this week in driving, so I put it out on social media and asked for the community's opinion. But I was driving as you go north and south on Tongass, and it's the intersection where there's Jefferson, Tongass. You're either going to go to Safeway or that way, or you're going to go up the hill, go to First Bank or whatever. And I was behind someone waiting for the green light. The light turned green, and all of a sudden they decided they wanted to turn left. So I sit behind them as all the cars on my right are going by. And then finally, when cars went by, the light turned yellow, and I decided I was going to make it through this green light, and I swerved out and went on to work. But I sat there almost through the entire light, like I said, and I decided to put it out there to find out if anyone else would be interested in me petitioning for a sign that says no left turn between the hours of 7 and 9 in the morning and 4 and 6 in the evening. And it was, I told everyone that I would mention it tonight, but there were conflicting opinions, so I'm probably not going to bring it up. I don't know how much it would cost, but it was very frustrating. And it happens daily because it happens to me a lot. And I'll notice that they're going to turn left if they turn their blinker on. This particular time, they waited for the light to turn green and then turned their blinker on. And that's frustrating. That's just an idiot. An idiot on the road. So, and I don't have road rage. I really don't.
Not much.
Yeah, we believe you.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Don't be ahead of me or behind me.
Use your turn signal.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
Judy.
Nothing.
Dick.
Nothing.
Good. Yeah, I encourage everybody to make it to that FEMA meeting. That's something that's going to impact a lot of people. Julie, I felt the same rage. I just avoid it now. Drives me crazy. Otherwise, we meet again here, I think, on the 7th of February.
First.
1st of February, yeah. Then I get confused easy. All right, and then I'll make sure I bring glasses. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.